This is Beyond the Dollar, where we tackle all matters politics and economics and how that affects you and your pocket. I'm Ibn Mabunda. We're coming to you from Zimbabwe's capital, Harare. Let's get started. Now, today on Beyond the Dollar, we focus on a significant chapter in the country's diplomatic engagement draws to a close. His 3-year mission has been marked with retrospective and forward-looking, and an opportunity to reflect on the evolution of EU-Zimbabwe relations across political, social, and economic fronts. At the core of this bilateral partnership lies a shared interest in strengthening trade and investment ties, particularly in priority sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, as well as energy. All investments in climate-smart agriculture, renewable energy, electoral Ambassador Jobst von Kekman, the outgoing EU ambassador to Zimbabwe. It's been 3 years since you've been in the country, and this is, of course, on Zimbabwean soil.
It's a great experience. I mean, people often say ambassadors, they come attached to this country. I think it was a very interesting posting, and on of course, Vikfal, Zwange, Bulawayo, Matopo Hills, Gonaraju, Nyanga, etc., etc. But I think it's what marks me, and I'm often saying, home is not a place. It's what people make you feel that you belong somewhere. I think the people of Zimbabwe have really marked me. They are warm, they are respectful, friendly, educated, and I have found really amazing people in all corners of this country. So that when I leave makes me sad that I leave behind these people who I got attached to.
Right, and of course, we reminisce the experiences as well as the engagements that were had between the EU and Zimbabwe during your tenure. My highlight, of course, being the EU-Zimbabwe Business Forum. Now, let's get into the teensy-weенsies of our conversation. Of course, since your arrival in October of 2022, to be specific, Zim-EU relations have navigated a shifting international and domestic landscape, from re-engagement efforts to governance reforms and even evolving trade links that of course have been a part and parcel of that period of your tenure. Now, looking back at your tenure, how would you describe the evolution of social, economic, and political relations between Zimbabwe and the European Union?
I think if I had to bring it down in one sentence, I would say the relations are better than before. Now, to break it down, I think when you come as an ambassador and diplomats come in a country, what's your task? Is to build bridges. And what I believe is we found these bridges, and we found these bridges in particular in the economic and in the trade themes. And if I look back to my 3 years here in the country, I think I have focused particularly in building these bridges up, the economic ties and the trade ties. You mentioned the EU-Zimbabwe Business Forum, but then we did trade facilitation. We brought through the European Investment Bank capital for Zimbabwean companies. And we have won 3 times the gold award in the ZITF.
Right.
And I think that was not known. I think before the EU did not participate. Now, that all has led to an increase of trade and investment. 30% in trade, 90% in foreign direct investment from the EU. I think that's nice, and that is only possible if the two sides work together, and I think that's what happened.
Right. During your mission in Zimbabwe, what have you personally learned about the country, its people, or even yourself? And are there specific experiences that significantly influence your outlook on Zimbabwe?
So when you come from one country, I'm German by origin, you come from that country, you're grown up with the culture. You are Zimbabwean, you are grown up with Zimbabwean culture. Then you move on, often with your family, like in my case, and then you see new things. And I think then you start reflecting, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Right.
And over the time, you develop your own culture. And in each country, you take something. And in Zimbabwe, I could mention a lot, but one thing which has particularly influenced our family, in which we are using ourselves, is making a plan. The resilience of people. Something doesn't work, we would have before had the tendency to say, oh, it's not working. Here, you ask a Zimbabwean would say, I make a plan. I make it work somehow. And I think that's a thing which has particularly influenced the culture of my family.
Okay.
Now, there are a lot of other things, the professionalism of the private sector, the enormous talent in the cultural areas, and so on. But if you ask about what it does to us, I think that is something I would like to outline.
Right. The EU remains one of Zimbabwe's key trading partners, with the recent figures showing notable two-way trade activity. Of course, when you look at the value of trade and investment between the EU and Zimbabwe, perhaps just getting into the 2024 figures, Zimbabwe exported goods worth 255 million euros to the EU and imported goods worth 538 million euros over that specific period. Which sectors are leading the charge in exports and imports, and how have trade patterns framed the engagement between the two countries?
Thanks for mentioning these figures. I think they are quite positive. I was just mentioning 3 years back, we were 30% down on these figures. Now we have over $880 million actually in total in trade figures. But why is that possible? Because the European Union and Zimbabwe have a trade agreement. It's the Economic Partnership Agreement. It allows any Zimbabwean company to export duty and tariff-free to the European Union. That is, in times where everybody talks about tariffs, it's their import from the EU. We are actually happy with that. So from the export side, we are the biggest buyer of horticulture products, by far the biggest buyer. In terms of imports, it's essentially machinery from the EU coming into the country. And I think that's a help enrolled in the export scheme. Couldn't it be more? Couldn't it be 300, 400, 500,000? I think it could. And I think for the years to come, that's probably something we should look into, to increase these figures, because we have such a good basis already.
Right. Beyond government-level engagements, much of the energy in EU-Zimbabwe relations has been channeled through business forums, trade fairs, and investor relations, as it were. Which initiatives or platforms during your time have proven most effective in enhancing EU-Zim trade relations?
Trade relations and I think economic relations at large, I think I would mention one first, which I didn't mention up to now, and that's the arrears clearance and debt resolution process. Because that sounds so technical. It's a process which has been put underway by His Excellency the President to basically eliminate the arrears in the debt. I think that is the single most important process, because it goes beyond finances. It goes into normalization of relations, working together, discussing openly. And that is not only applicable to the EU, but I think to any partner out there. Right. So I think that's the single most important process. Then between Zimbabwe and the EU, we had the partnership dialogue. Right. In November 2024. And that, again, was an example of that we are able to talk to each other in a very constructive way. Right. In a way where we don't hold back. We say what we have to say. We might disagree. We might laugh together. We might say, no, that's not like that. But that's how it should be. It should not be like two walls and nobody is really talking. And what I really liked about this dialogue, that it went into depth and it was open, sometimes emotional, and it's good like that. Then, more specifically on businesses, we were mentioning the EU-Zimbabwe Business Forum. I mean, that was a big endeavor for us. When I remember when I thought of it a year ago, I had no idea, would we have 3, 4, 5 European companies coming? And originally, I wanted to do it in the context of the Zimbabwean International Trade Fair. But then it had traction, and then I thought, okay, let's book the Makels Hotel, and let's go all there. And you were there even, and you could see we had almost 70 European companies coming, hundreds of Zimbabwean companies. We could struck deals for $7 million after a week after the forum. There was a lively exchange, almost 2,000 B2B meetings. I think that was great. And when I talked to the European entrepreneurs across the board, they were saying, well, we had our own perception of Zimbabwe, but coming here changed something. We could experience how Zimbabwe is, and I think that is absolutely important. That brings people, feel not a secret. Normally when our bank, the European Investment Bank, does these kind of on-lending facilities, we have maybe a 5 to 10% failure rate. In Zimbabwe, 0. All companies are paying back. That's fantastic as well. And I think it contributes to this positive reputation of the private sector in particular.
Well, thank you for that positive feedback, and of course something to take home. And now, green growth and sustainability are increasingly central to global development cooperation, with the EU's global gateway strategy specifically targeting these priority areas. What concrete support has the EU provided to Zimbabwe under this particular strategy during your tenure?
First of all, a word about Global Gateway. It's our flagship worldwide, 300 billion for Africa, 150 billion euros. That's enormous. But where we are focusing on really, as you said, is sustainability and green growth. Why sustainability? Because when you do infrastructure in countries, here we did the rehabilitation of the Kariba Dam, for example, you want to do that in a way that it doesn't destroy the nature, the environment, that communities are preserved, and so on. When you focus on green growth, is also because for export, the European market is asking for that. If you look at what is essentially exported, what are the biggest successes in export to the EU, these are green growth products. I was talking about horticulture before. So I think that works extremely well. And so our focus here is to support these value chains. We have $250 million for green and climate smart agriculture. Zimbabwe is an agricultural country, and I hope in the future it will grow much more when I look at the new land policy.
Right.
And we have multiple initiatives for farmers, for women, for renewable energy, green growth in the country. We operate through local banks, so people can go to the local banks and basically can also get loans with a longer tenure and a lower interest rate.
Right. Moving beyond relations with Zimbabwe and taking a look at SADC-EU relations, as well as some of the activities that you have been undertaking. Question would be, what role do such forums play in shaping the trajectory of the EU-Africa relations, and how effective are they in addressing common challenges like climate change, regional peace and security, economic integration? Of course, this is speaking to some of the engagements that took place during, of course, the time when Zimbabwe had the captaincy of the bloc.
I think you mentioned the topics even already, because some topics you cannot only discuss bilaterally. You were just talking, climate change is a good example.
Right.
Look at the drought last year. It didn't stop in Zimbabwe. It was regional. So many topics, peace and security, require a regional reply and response. And working at that level with SADC, EU SADC, I believe it's very important. Like it is important as well to work at an African Union, European Union level. So the 3 levels are important. Now this year for me was particularly interesting because Zimbabwe had the leadership, still has it, the presidency of SADC. So the meeting took place here, and from our side, it was a historic moment, because for the first time, the Polish foreign minister came here. He's a heavyweight in the European sphere.
Absolutely.
Foreign Minister Sikorski from Poland. And I think that was a landmark visit with a lot of exchanges and discussions.
Right.
And I believe he also could get an impression of what Zimbabwe is within the SADC meeting, but also in just being here. So yes, I believe it is important to discuss at that level.
Right. From renewable energy to infrastructure development and technical education, the EU has supported different kinds of projects here in Zimbabwe. Which of these initiatives have you found most promising in terms of real-world impact, scalability, or long-term benefit, particularly for underserved communities?
We have just started the second phase of it. In the first phase, we meant, for me, the biggest satisfaction I get when I see the result in people. When you have a smallhold farmer participating in the program and being able to double, triple, quadruple the revenues. When you have a woman, she gets extra revenue for the household. I think these are the most satisfying examples for me. It's more in the micro world, because often we sit back as ambassadors, we look at the big figures, but the real success is when it comes to people.
Right, one person at a time, and it's when it's palpable that you can touch it, you can feel it.
Absolutely.
You can get to witness the change, the past, the present, as well as the future, and what, of course, it translates to. Now, as Zimbabwe moves from a model of aid dependency to one based more on partnership and mutual benefit, there is growing debate about the right balance between development aid, trade, and direct investment. And you would find that that conversation happening everywhere around the continent. From your experience, how do you assess the current mix of instruments the EU uses to engage with Zimbabwe?
We're in a world where geopolitics are changing. And with the change in geopolitics, also, I think the relation between trade, investment, and aid is changing. So from the European side, we moved to a partnership. And a partnership means we find ourselves, and I was citing the bridges earlier, we found ourselves on a bridge where we have a common interest. And we look at that common interest. And once it's identified, it's mutual beneficial. So that's what a partnership is about. So I believe we are moving away from aid dependency and aid-driven cooperation to a real partnership. And if you look at it, who is creating jobs? Who is in charge of prosperity? Who is contributing to that? Right. It's the private sector, right? So the easiest way to start that is trade. So for me, trade is the number one. And I have invested a lot in order to boost trade. But the second one is investment. Because often when people start trading, they familiarize themselves with a country. The next step is to say, maybe I go in country, maybe I invest, maybe I go up in this country on the value chain with manufacturing, for example. And for me, the aid, the traditional aid model comes then third as a model which supports other initiatives. And I believe in the coming years, that's probably what we're going to see. Private sector in the middle, the aid is the support to the engagement.
Right. You spoke about what's coming and even going forward. And of course, transitions in diplomatic leadership offer continuity, but also new opportunities and challenges. Now, question is this. As you prepare to hand over the baton to your successor, what challenges or unresolved issues do you believe should be top priorities to maintain momentum and ensure that the EU-Zimbabwe relations continue to grow beyond the foundation that you have set at this point?
Well, the first one, I would love to see that on trade and investment we hit the 1 billion mark.
Right.
We had a great run over the 3 years, and I hope in the next couple of years that goes on. More companies enroll in the trade scheme, more European investment coming here. So we hit the $1 billion mark. The other topic, I really hope that the arrears clearance and debt resolution process moves forward. Why? Because once that is resolved, it's a door opener for sovereign lending. Sovereign lending allows Zimbabwe, my hope for the next couple of years. And it will require a commitment on all sides to achieve that. But it is achievable. And that's why it goes beyond the pure hope. I think that should be the next milestone.
Right. As we wrap up, what would be your parting message to the country of Zimbabwe?
My parting message is that having been here and having also been in other African countries, is we sometimes forget how close Europe and Africa are together. 30 kilometers away, two continents being 30 kilometers away. And somehow, at the same time, I believe these are the two continents knowing each other the best. Maybe we have a loaded past, but this loaded past also means we know each other. We speak the same languages. So the message I would like to give is, it is time to concentrate on what we know about each other, what unites us, not what divides us. And that goes actually very well along with the motto of the European Union, which is united in diversity. So I believe from the Zimbabwean side, it's good to look at Europe as a friend, as a steadfast partner, which we are. And from the European side, to look at Zimbabwe in a positive way and eventually also come here and experience that country, which has really impressed me, and I'm sure it will impress many other Europeans as well.
Well, Your Excellency, thank you for
Thank you,
appearing
Eben.
on Beyond the Dollar, and wish you success on your successive diplomatic engagement, of course.
Thanks a lot.
Well, of course, that's a wrap on Beyond the Dollar. And, of course, I was joined in studio by Ambassador Jobst von Kirchmann, the outgoing EU ambassador to Zimbabwe. And, of course, that's a wrap on Beyond the Dollar. I'm Eben Mabunda, the money man. Let them do what they do. When we do what we do, we mean business. Thank you for watching and have a good day.